Well, that'll do it. This is going to be a little bit of difference of performance tonight. In fact, it's different than anything I've ever done. In fact, it's different than anything anyone's ever done. And as grandiose as that sounds, it's absolutely true. I guess the closest thing to it would be Victor Borge. Ah, some people like Victor Borge. I love Victor Borge. Honk your horn if you like Victor Borge. I grew up watching Victor Borge. I grew up in Long Island, New York, which, as I wrote in my book, is a cultural wasteland. So there was no art there, but there was a lot of television. And the people in Long Island, the average citizens would read TV Guide, and the intellectuals would read Reader's Digest. And so I got all my music education from television, and I really don't exaggerate when I say that. In fact, I was 17 years old when I first went to Manhattan School of Music as a concert piano major. That was the first joke I ever told. And I thought you could just play music just by intending to play music. And when I got to the Manhattan School of Music, I found out there were people who had a deep respect for the culture, classical music. They really understood the difference in Mozart and Mendelssohn. And I didn't. I had no understanding whatsoever. I just got in because, I don't know, I must have showed them some potential. There's that word again. But my influences on the piano were Chico Marx, Jimmy Durante, and Victor Borge, and Roger Williams. Does anybody remember Roger Williams? All right. There's a few of us still alive. Roger Williams was the one that had the first hit on Autumn Leaves, for all you jazz guys that think that Autumn Leaves is a jazz song. It went like this. Roger Williams was a huge influence on my life. He was the only guy I mistook him for a jazz musician. But he was pretty tasteful for one of those kind of piano players, you know. But Victor Borge, he was my main guy because he had a TV show on every week, you know, and that's really where I learned about the piano. That and Chico Marx, who was amazing. I've rarely seen a jazz player or a classical player that could play the piano with the aplomb of Chico Marx. Is that the right use of the word aplomb? Does anybody know what the word aplomb means? What does it mean? Sorry? Was that exactly the right use of it? Great. Whew. I never saw anybody play the piano with the aplomb of Chico Marx. So he would go like something like that. And that's what I learned music was. I thought it was entertainment. And then I went to school and I felt very embarrassed about that. Because I met all these people that it wasn't entertainment. It was a quest for excellence. And audience be damned. And so I had to sort of hide my Long Island roots for a few years and try to get into this. But I just couldn't care about it. It's a funny thing. So I masqueraded. I kind of dropped out of Manhattan School of Music. And I went to Berklee School of Music, which is thought of as a jazz school. And it is a jazz school. But it also houses a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing in music. You know, in a classical school at that time, you had to have achieved something to get accepted. That wasn't true in a jazz school. You could just be starting and you got accepted if you had a certain gift for paying tuition. Then you were allowed to go to a jazz school. So you see what they did is they took in a lot of people, and these people were like bottom feeders. They used them as fodder for scholarship. So luckily I ran into a lot of people that also didn't know what they were doing in the music, and that was my first sense of camaraderie. And then I did get excited about jazz for a while, but I was still trying to play in music. And remember, coming from a culturalist society, my true self was to play whatever came in my head. Like when I was a little kid, I used to play very free. I would play emotionally charged, see, because I watched a lot of movies. So I didn't really hear classical music, but I heard a lot of movie soundtracks. And the composers of movies were guys who were ripping off all the classical composers. So I got sort of a vicarious exposure to classical music through movies, you know. So when I improvised, it would be a combination of movie soundtrack music, very dramatic, but then it might morph into a little rock folk ballad, because after all it was, you know, 1965. And then it would go back to the movie. And I would just go wherever I want. Sometimes it would be quotes of TV commercials. Now, you see, I hear a few people laugh. You probably think, well, that's not art, TV commercials. One of the most amazing pieces of music I ever heard, of course it was less than a minute long because it was a radio commercial. They used to play it in between innings of the Mets games on radio. And it was a commercial for a beer. And it was a little jazz. I think this is probably where I started to love jazz. It was a little jazz trio with a singer. I'm going to play it for you because I tell you, I get overwhelmed when I hear this thing. I don't know the reason. I can't tell you why. More people like Rheingold. The beer extra dry. Take this part, take that. But we must be doing something. Yes, we must be doing something right. Isn't that beautiful?